This encounter happened in the summer of 2011. I was on a cross-country road trip with my mother and brother. We had just crossed the border into Michigan from Wisconsin. It was about 11 p.m. We were running behind schedule and decided to stop at a rest area about 2 miles before we reached the town of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. We pulled into the rest area and parked in the corner away from the other cars. It was an extremely hot night, and we all went for a walk. We walked down a path through the woods and onto a small wooden bridge that crossed a creek. We stopped to look at the water. Then, we turned around and walked back to the parking lot. We walked up to the parking lot, and I quickly realized that I had forgotten to grab my brother's cigarettes. I told my mom that I was going to go run down to the bridge and grab them, since he accidentally forgot them and lost them. So, she and my brother walked around to the front of the car, and I walked back to the bridge. I grabbed the cigarettes. Then, I walked back towards the car, because we were getting ready to leave. About halfway between me getting the car and the rest area, I noticed something running across the road, about 50 feet away from me. It was big, and it was running fast. I was in the middle of the parking lot, and I stop, and I look at this thing. It stopped in the middle of the road, turned to look at me. I stopped walking and stood there. I was facing a creature, about 7 feet tall, covered in long, shaggy hair. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, and it stood kind of hunched over. Its face looked like a dog's face, with long, pointy ears. Its head was very long and thin, and it had a very long snout. The mouth was open, and I could see that it had long, sharp teeth. Its eyes emitted this dull yellow glow, and they seemed transfixed on me. I was frozen in place. It didn't move for a few seconds. Then, it took off running across the parking lot, towards some buildings in the woods. When it ran, it moved down to all fours, and it ran very fast. I saw it run off the edge of the parking lot. I never moved. I stood there for a few moments, trying to comprehend what I had just seen. I walked back to the car, and my mother was standing by the driver's side door, and she asked why it took so long. I told her that I had forgotten my brother's cigarettes. She looked at me a little weird and asked if I was okay. I had told her the first time before I had even left to go to the bridge, but I assumed she didn't hear me. I told her I was fine. We got in the car and left the rest area. When we drove through town the next morning, we stopped at a coffee shop, and we were talking about the local legend of the Dogman that's supposedly all over Michigan. Well, my mom tells me that she had apparently seen one before. She said when she was younger, she was driving down the road with my brother, and they were laughing about urban legends and myths. She looks over at the road and saw a tall, hunched figure walking in the middle. It was walking on all fours, and it was covered in a thick brown fur, she said. She claims it wasn't a bear, and it was not a person in a costume. She tells me that it looked like a huge dog. I didn't believe her at first, but, I guess it made sense. I never heard of the Dogman until now, and I guess I just didn't comprehend it. Yeah, with everything going on, this sighting was really creepy to me, though. And at the time, I didn't quite fully understand it. Looking back, it's been years since then. I still think about it a lot. I have a lot of questions I don't know about. And I don't know if it was the same creature as my sighting or not. What my mom saw. I saw something that night, but I don't quite know what it was. I know it was not a bear, and it was not a man. I've seen a lot of animals in my life, but I've never seen anything like this. And I have never really told anybody about my story, at least until now. I'll reiterate this again. I can't stand here and say for certain it was a Dogman. All I know is what I saw, and I've never seen it before. I'm posting this because I can't find anything else like it, and I'm hoping somebody else has seen something similar. The date was November 14th, 2012. I was driving home from a party. It was about 2:30 a.m. The moon was bright, and the stars were out. I was lost in thought, thinking about the next day, which was a big day for me. Currently, I was in a suburb of Toronto and approaching city limits. I had just passed a sign for a junior college that I wanted to attend in the fall. I was planning on going to the school to get information on the program, but I had never gotten around to it. I was hoping the school was still open late, at least the visitor center, so I could stop by and get more information. I know. I understand that's kind of a weird route, but whatever. I was driving on the road that ran through a residential area, and all the houses around me were very dark, including mine. The streetlights were on, but no one was outside. The area, though, was very eerily peaceful. Suddenly, I heard a loud thump coming from behind me, but it was just a single loud thump. It sounded like something hit the back of my car. I thought maybe an animal had jumped out. I checked my rearview mirror, but I didn't see anything. I kept driving. I thought it might have been a dog that had maybe jumped out in front of my car, but whatever, I don't know. I hear the sound again, and this time, it was a loud banging on the back of my car, and it was accompanied by what sounded like snarling and growling. So, I look in my rearview mirror. Still nothing. I continue driving, and I come to a stop sign at the end of the road. I stopped, and suddenly, I felt weight jump onto the trunk of my car. So for the third time, I look in my rearview mirror, and I see a dog, a huge dog. I didn't know exactly what it was. I shouted, and this dog, or what I thought was a dog, jumps onto the back of my car and appeared to be holding onto my vehicle with two human-like hands. Well, they reminded me more of like raccoon hands. It was using its hands and arms to hold onto the back of my vehicle. I could see the arms and hands gripping tightly and pushing down on the trunk of my car. I slammed on the gas and sped down the street. I was terrified. I didn't know what this thing was. I just knew that it was big. The arms were covered in thick hair, and the hands had these long claws at the end. This animal, or whatever it was, holding on for dear life here, and I'm swerving, trying to get this thing to let go. I keep looking back in my rearview mirror into the face of this thing, and it's ugly. Really scary looking, honestly. I got to the end of the street, and the thing let go. So I slammed on the brakes. I had no idea what was going on, but I did not want that thing getting in my car. It let go, bolts off, and jumps out, letting a terrible screaming noise. I could hear it running off into the distance, into the darkness of the night, and I did not see exactly where it went. I heard it jumping over stuff, causing a ruckus. The next day, I ended up telling my girlfriend about the encounter, but she said she didn't believe me. She said it was probably a large dog, or who knows. Last I checked, though, dogs don't do what this thing did. I was driving through a wooded area in the night, and I saw a dog-like thing walking on the side of the road. I slowed the car down and tried to get a look at it. It was a black dog standing on its hind legs, and it looked really weird. I thought it was a bear at first, but it was way too big and too strangely shaped to be a dog or a bear. Then, it stands up on its hind legs and casually walks off into the trees. I looked at it more closely, and it was definitely some type of canid creature. I had my phone in my hand, so I tried recording it. I was shaking like a leaf, so I couldn't really get the best footage. I tried following it into the forest, and it turned around and looked at me. I was freaking out by this point, and I lost it. The last thing I saw was it running away into the forest, and all I could think of was this thing jumping out of the trees at me, like it was going to charge at me. I was so scared. I had never seen a dog like this before, and I pray to God I never see one again. I tried to do some internet research about it. I guess it's a thing called the Ozark Howler. I guess they're pretty common creatures here down in the south. But I never imagined in my life I would see one like this. I should also add that when I say I followed it, I didn't actually get out of my car. I pulled over on the side of the road to see if I could shine my light, to see where and if it was, to try and get its position. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Although, I felt a lot more curiosity and shock at the mere sight of this thing, rather than fear and dread. This was truly an experience I don't plan on forgetting. For the first time, I'm going to be telling the story of my own personal encounter with the creature known as the Michigan Dogman. It took place back in the summer of 2015 in the small community of St. Louis, Michigan. I was living with a close friend at the time, and I decided to go out to the local gas station at night to look for UFOs. And my friend, we will call him Jack, was not interested in going. He was far too busy watching TV and drinking beer. So, I decided to go out anyway. After about an hour or so of sitting in my car out in the middle of nowhere, hoping I would see some forms of life in the sky, I gave up. I decided it was time to go home. I was a bit freaked out though for some reason. It was just this feeling I can't explain. I started the car and began driving home. I was on a long, lonely dirt road that connects with a bigger one. That's what you get for taking night roads, huh? Suddenly, I noticed something running across the road in front of me. I slowed down a bit, and my headlights illuminated something. I was scared at first, but then I realized what it was. It was a dog, or what appeared to be sticking out of the trees. Then, as I saw it more clearly, that's when I began to tense up. What I was looking at wasn't just a dog. This thing had the head of a dog, but it looked more like a cross between a wolf and a German shepherd. It had a body similar to a dog, but was very lean and slender. And the scariest part of all, it was walking like a human, bipedally. I slam on the brakes, and then I notice that this thing was not alone. There was about 6 or 7 of them, all coming out of the trees. It was then that I noticed that they were all larger than the first one I saw. Much larger. That means the one I saw was probably a juvenile. These things were massive and built huge. They all had a mixture of long, slender legs and long snouts, and all had these glowy, orange, yellow, red eyes. Mixes of smoky gray to brown and black. These were huge animals. I was terrified by the sight. I didn't know what to do. They all just stood there staring at me for a few seconds, like a deer in the headlights, unsure as how to handle a person like me seeing that they exist. It was as if I'd interrupted them doing something, or while they were on a mission to go somewhere and do something. So I slowly put the car in reverse, but now they're on the road, and I kind of just kept reversing and kept reversing. The last I saw of them was them looking back at me as they decided to, at the last minute, run off into the woods. I was pretty scared. I didn't want to go home, so I went to a neighboring town to get a bite to eat. I was shaking and freaked out by this. I didn't tell anybody in my friend's family. Then, I decided to go back to the same spot the next night. I wanted to prove myself this was just a fluke. I was hoping to see something again, but I was also scared. I was thinking that maybe I was crazy. But it happened again. I saw the same thing again. This time, I only saw the one, like it was waiting for me. I quickly drove off, and that was enough. I was convinced that there was some sort of creature there that was not normal. I was pretty sure that they were not dogs. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I was terrified. The next day, I decided to ask a good friend of mine, not the one I lived with, but this one is a police officer, about what I had seen. I didn't tell him everything, just the basics. I asked him, is it possible that it could have been a coyote? And he tells me it was highly unlikely, I mean, I would have seen many others. He tells me that he believes what I saw is called a wolf dog, but not a werewolf. The thought that something or someone could change into a half-man, half-wolf hybrid was too outlandish. I hadn't even told him about the part of it walking on two legs. I just explained that it was some large dog. I didn't think he'd believe me if I was honest. I would later learn that these creatures are called Dogman and are all over the country, apparently. Then, I would go on to have several other encounters. I have had a few other encounters with Dogmen since this first happened, so I know this thing is real. It was not my imagination. It wasn't a coyote and it was not a regular wolf. I've seen it again and again. In fact, 2 times in broad daylight. And I've had other people see it with me. I have had other people see it by themselves and talk about their sightings with me. I'm convinced this is a real creature. Some type of canine-like creature. Very strange. It is the stuff of legends, to be honest. I know what the creature wants me to see it, because it has shown itself to me several times. It's as if it is now waiting for me now. I've had other people see it, like I said, and they too are terrified. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on. It has been seen by other people in our community, in town. Maybe there's more of them than just this one pack. There is a huge pack that I know of running around and scaring the daylights out of people. It's weird, you know, because, like, once you see it and it knows it, you become marked, dare I say, and we all start seeing this thing far more often than you'd ever like to. You don't ever just have one Dogman encounter. It just starts there. Anyway, this is my story of what happened that night that I first saw it. I know that it's real, and so many others are seeing it, like you document constantly. I've had a lot of experiences with this creature, and sometimes it makes me wonder, what does it want from me? I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest. I was driving home from work one night, and I was about an hour away in total from home. I was driving on a 2-lane highway, and it was about 10:30 at night. I'm doing about 55 miles an hour, and I was the only car on the road. Now, I was about a mile from my exit when I see something cross into the road. Thinking it was a deer, I slow down, and as I get closer, I realized it was not a deer. It was something else entirely. I've never seen an animal like this. It was standing in the middle of the road, and it was facing my direction. I slow down to about 35 miles an hour, and now I'm roughly 100 or so yards away from it. I was looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is that? I was not sure what it was. It was strange looking. I stopped my car, rolled down my car window, about halfway down. I reached over to my glove compartment and grabbed my handgun. I had never been in a situation where I would need to use it, and I doubt I would even try to shoot at it. I mean, it was far too large. I could not get a good shot at it anyway. I grabbed my handgun and I pointed it at it. The thing turned its head about 45 degrees, looked at me, and looked at my handgun. It began to growl very loudly, so I pointed directly at its face, my hand shaking, and I'm nervous to pull a shot off. I was very afraid of whatever this was, and so I put my car slowly in reverse and go back maybe 20 yards. It was still standing there, standing its ground. So I grab my phone and I call 911. I tell them there's this strange animal standing in the middle of the road, and I have my gun pointed at it. Now, during this, it was still growling, and I wanted to come and check it out. I gave them my location. The dispatcher did not believe me. I was afraid it was going to try and get in my car. I looked at this thing, and it turned its eyes to me, and it was a really deep red color. I realized this thing was not human in any way. Then, this thing kind of let out a huff, turned and leapt quickly off into the woodline. I nervously put my gun back and I hightailed it out of there that night. The next morning, I started to think to myself, that could not have happened. So, I drive back to that intersection, or that part of road, but I can never see anything beyond the road that would give me any glimpse of it ever being there. I was hoping to find footprints or something, but nothing. I even pulled over and parked my car. I walked about half a mile up and down the road, and there was nothing. No hair, no traces of ever making me think that I wasn't insane. Nothing unusual. No strange tracks, no evidence, nothing. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just dreamt it. I don't know. But since when does that sort of thing happen? I'm still at a loss. I was driving home one evening in October of 2019. My ex-wife Sally and her new husband Derek and myself were in my car. I was driving a Chevy 2000, if I remember right, and I was about 7 miles out from a local hospital. That's the only geolocation I can remember. And I see this, what I thought was a dog, walking along the side of the road. At first, he seems to be kind of minding his own business, and being a jerk, I guess I thought I'd try and scare him by speeding up to get him to kind of get out of the road. Not that he was in the road, but he was kind of weaving out. I was gaining on him pretty fast, and the animal reacted to my approach by jumping into the center of the road. But I didn't slow down. I figured I had a car and this was just a dog. When I startled this, though, he fixed on me and as the human antagonist, and I saw that this was no dog, but a creature that looked more wolfish than like a dog. So, all in one moment, I'm glancing at this animal as I have to swerve slowly to the opposite side of the road to avoid hitting what I thought was a dog but is actually not, and my eyes are supposed to be on the center line. But I remember seeing some sort of pattern on this animal, and I'm thinking, is this a bear? What is this? When, unbelievably, this creature, very comfortably mind you, stands up on its hind legs with its front paws and tries to reach out to the driver's side door, looking at me, with a snarl expression on its face. Just sit with me here for a moment. Visualize a 7-foot-tall, upright canine werewolf in the front of a Chevy Malibu. I passed by him while he was there, and I cranked the wheel to swerve the car over to the side of the road. We came to a stop on the right-hand side. This thing was now less than 40 feet away from us, and slowly approaching our car. The animal sort of awkwardly walked. While it seemed to comfortably get up on 2 legs, it was weird. I can't describe it well. And it's as if he was kind of hobbling over to us. Very odd. And sort of swinging back and forth his arms, using them for balance like a human. This thing gave us a pissed off expression, then turned and quickly headed into the woods to our left. I'd say east, but it's been over a year, and I don't exactly remember how that road is laid out. We watched him until he kind of got a little deeper off into the woods. We were all pretty spooked by this sighting, so we turned the car around and get back on the road. As we're pulling away, this same creature shoots out of the woods, coming towards our car like a fired missile. My ex-wife and her husband start screaming, so I pedal to the metal, and this thing is now darting into the woods next to us, staying parallel to the vehicle the entire time, but in the woods, while I'm trying to drive like a madman and get us away from this thing. I remember at one point, I looked over and see this thing running right by our vehicle, and now I'm starting to panic. This thing bolts out and jumps directly over our car into the adjacent woods on the other side, and I nearly swerve and hit an oncoming vehicle. I drive a little ways further until this thing seems like it's not chasing us anymore. But I'm here to tell you that it's some pretty real freaky stuff. Imagine the terror they felt in Jurassic Park when the T-Rex was chasing them in the car. Obviously that's a movie, but that's kind of what it felt like. Talk about a nightmare. I don't know what the hell chased us that night, but it sure as hell sent all of us on a freakout. I've been a truck driver for years and years, but I can never forget the one night that I had a very horrifying experience while being out on the road. Let me just tell you my experience. I was out driving this road at around 2 a.m. I was on my way to the nearest town to deliver a load of produce. I was driving down the road on a straightaway, when I see a pair of red eyes glowing in the dark beside the road. I thought it was an animal at first, and I slowed down the truck to see what it was. It turned out to be a Dogman. I looked back at him as he was walking on all fours towards me. He had long hair and was covered in a dark, brownish-red fur. Listen, I know what it was. I listen to a lot of cryptid radio shows, and I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to stuff like cryptids and Bigfoot and Dogman. I just instinctively know that this is what I saw. Plus, it looked like a flippin' werewolf. Anyway, I just drove as fast as I could away from the creature. I was scared to death. I can't believe that I saw what I did. I never even told anybody about the encounter until now. I don't know why I never told anybody before, but it's just too scary to think about. I'm pretty scared of Dogman to this day, even though for the longest time I'd hoped they didn't exist. I hoped they were just some sort of fictional entertainment. Now, I know they're real. I just hope I never see one again. Oh, and I've tried to join some groups on Facebook where you can tell about your personal encounter story, but I've decided against it. I really don't want to face ridicule from people about what I saw, and decided it was best to keep it to myself. Even hardcore Bigfoot enthusiasts will be quick to denounce any Dogman encounter. I even wonder if you'll take me seriously. Thanks for reading anyway. One night, while on my back porch having a smoke after a long day of stress and work, I see these pair of red eyes just sitting high up in the tree line, looking right over in my direction. They were set back in a dark outline, not really having a face or form, but I knew they were staring right at me. I immediately froze and just looked back at them. There was a huge pair of eyes, and they were bigger than normal human eyes, and they were very dark in color. The eyes were set higher up in the silhouette of a head, and it was a little lower than the top of a human head. I kept staring at it, and it just stared back at me. I was in disbelief and shock. I could not figure out what this was, and I could see its head move a little. Its eyes would kind of move back and forth, but it never turned away or left. It was watching me the entire time, and I was watching it. I don't even know how long this went on for. It could have been seconds, but it felt like minutes or even hours. You know how time will drag. Then, as it starts to move a bit, I could see the shape is actually not that of a human, but really a large dog that's on two legs standing up. I was frozen in fear and disbelief. I didn't know what to do. I was in shock, trying to figure out what this was. And so I'm thinking to myself, what on earth is this thing? I was being very conscientious of my surroundings, and I was on high alert. I could not move. I was frozen on my back porch. As it stood there, I could see it turn its head to the right to look towards the backside of my house, where I had a rather large shed. It was looking around the side of the shed, and as I'm watching it, I hear this cry come from the direction it's looking. It sounds like a muffled cry, but my only guess is that it possibly, whatever animal this was, had a youngling over by my shed, and possibly saw me as a threat. As soon as I heard this cry, it takes off running straight up to the trees and into the tree line. Then, I hear it emerge out of the trees on the other side, and goes to the side of the shed, where I heard this crying-like noise to begin with. It then runs off into the other tree line, opposite of the shed. And pretty scared by the whole ordeal, I decided to run in my house and stay put. I was far too afraid to deal with whatever that thing was out there in my yard. So, I just tried to go to bed, but I could not sleep. I tossed and turned and could not get my mind to focus on anything but what I saw. It was about a good hour later, maybe plus, that I heard something large come up on the back porch, and I heard this loud bang, and the door to my back porch was rattling very hard. It startled me. I jump up out of bed and go see what it was. I opened the door with a weapon and a light, and it was dark. I could not see anything. I turned the light on, but who or whatever that had come onto my porch was now gone. I shut the door, locking it, and I go back to bed. This was some terrifying stuff. Obviously, somebody or something was trying to open the door and get into my house. Is there any coincidence between what I saw that night and what happened? I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, I stayed up the rest of the night. I was too afraid to fall back asleep. I was very alert and awake. So maybe about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I decided to go back and have a cigarette. I was on my same back porch smoking when I see the same dark shape again approaching my house. I look over and it stops, and now it's standing across the yard from me, right almost where I had seen it the first time. I could see that it was clearly looking in my direction. And now, because of the night, the moon was now positioned in the sky differently this time, and gave much more visibility to what I was looking at. I could see this thing was some sort of werewolf-looking creature. And I was convinced I was having a psychotic breakup. So I was like, you know what? I'm done. I put my cigarette out, walked inside, and decided I had just deprived my body of too much sleep. It was time for bed. I was too tired to be afraid. I wake up the next morning, go out to my porch, and kind of evaluate things. Look around. There were no signs of anything in the yard, so I decided to go check out the shed to see if anything was around there. I checked around the shed and there was nothing at all. I went around the side of the shed, towards the back, and I find 2 dead birds on the ground. They looked like they had been hit by something, like bludgeoned. I kind of looked at them more and there were no signs of what exactly killed them, just that they were possibly killed with a large object, like they were kind of flattened out. They were dead. As I'm looking at them, I start to smell this atrocious rotten odor, and it's not coming from these birds, and I cannot place where the smell is coming from exactly. So I'm starting to look around and I finally see the source. Maybe 5 yards away, closer to the back of the tree line, is this dead doe shredded to pieces. This thing looked like it got into a fight with a meat grinder, and it stunk so bad. This wasn't that long ago, and after doing some looking up online, I think I'm convinced I have a Dogman or 2 living around where I live. Great. I have a very old barn on the far side of my property that my husband and I have not used or touched in years. It needs some desperate repairing on the inside, and I haven't gotten around to it, or got the time. However, I believe something is making the barn its home. I see this large dark shape moving around the barn near dusk. I could see it from part of my house when I look out my window and see these tall ears perched on top of whatever animal it is. Sometimes I'm certain it will come up to the house because I can hear its loud, heavy breathing, and I see its eyes glowing, red in color. It stands on 2 legs. I promise you it's not a bear of any kind or any known animal that I've ever seen. And I'm not really sure how to explain what I'm seeing. But you know what lurks beneath? I've just got glimpses of it by now, of this thing looking in our windows and walking around out near our house. I'm not really sure what it is. My husband and I have seen this creature from time to time, and we don't see it all the time. My husband is convinced it's a Bigfoot. Me? I'm not so sure. When I was a little girl, I had a Bigfoot encounter of my own by a creek where I used to live. And those wood boogers don't look anything like what this thing looks like. This is much more canid in appearance, if that makes any sense. I'm not trying to suggest werewolf. I don't even want to use that term because it makes it sound fictitious and ridiculous. Anyhow, the other night, I had gotten up to go to the bathroom, and I looked out my bedroom window and I see this thing, maybe 100 yards or so from the house, standing there. It was looking toward the house and it had these enormous ears and these red eyes, the same ones it's always had. So I know it's the same creature. Its arms are hanging exceptionally low to its knees. It then turned and kind of slowly walked off into the woods. Scared me to death that night. Because even though it hasn't tried to harm us, you just never know. I've tried to look online and the only thing I could find is these things called Dogman. What's the difference between that and a werewolf? And is this true? I live in a very small rural community here in the southern United States. My family has lived in this part for several generations. I consider it a very safe place to live. I always felt safe growing up here, and it seems like a very safe place to raise children. I have never heard of a single violent crime committed in my own town, and there's a strong sense of community that keeps our tiny town running smoothly. On most nights, I could even leave my doors unlocked and my keys inside my vehicles, and not have to worry about a thing. For the most part, the animals in my town are very well behaved. There are always the occasional loose dogs that chase after cars, but they're harmless. One evening, when I was about 24 years old, my friend and her boyfriend and I decided to go for a drive around town. We were just going to drive around the main streets and then make our way back to home. It was a nice evening, and there were not too many people out and about. About a block from my house, I noticed this strange-looking dog coming out of a back alley. Now, right off the bat, the thing that I noticed that stood out immediately was just how large and how black this dog was. I mean, it was unusually dark. It wasn't just that it was a dark-colored dog. I mean, this thing looked like it had been dipped in ink. It was so dark that it was hard to make out details. But then its attention was turned towards us. It immediately rears its head at us and bares its teeth. We slow down the car, and as we're looking at this, we're trying to make sense of what we're seeing because 2 and 2 are just not making 4. This thing has way too many sharp teeth in its mouth to be a dog. Plus, it looked awkward. Like its front legs were much stronger and longer than its back legs. So I thought, is this a mutant or something? Maybe a mutated dog? I don't know. We were scared, but we were also very curious about what we were looking at. This animal spent maybe another second baring its teeth and then quickly kind of backed away into the shadows of the alley. We were all pretty creeped out by it. The impression I got from whatever kind of dog this was is that it did not want to be seen. We just so happened to be at the right place at the right time, and we caught it. It did not like that it had been seen. Still one of the freakier memories I have. And no, I never did find out what it was. That's why I'm emailing you.